Edelbrock offers a couple of different styles of carburetor, but which one is best for your application? We'll talk about that today, and I'll show you the pros and cons of each carburetor. Well, let's go. So Edelbrock's got a couple of different carburetors, so we're going to break these down into the three main series of carburetors. We'll talk about the VRS last because that's the newest and latest, but really we're going to concentrate on the Performer series, the Thunder series, and then the new AVS2 carburetor. But they've got some pros and cons, and we're going to talk about the general ones that cover that AFB style and AF or AVS style carburetor together as a group, because really there's some general ones that cover them that we can talk about them each one individually, but like I say, there's some general ones that cover all of those series of carburetors. So that's what we'll talk about real quick first. So universally, when you talk about the AVS and the AFB style carburetor, there's some pros and cons that really talk about all of these categories of carburetor. So let's run through the pros first. They've got the same rebuild kit. I know it doesn't sound very spectacular, but really when there's one part number of rebuild kit for all of them, it's kind of cool. You don't have to, shop through 10 different ones or maybe buy the wrong one. One rebuild kit part number covers all of it. The same rods and jet styles are through all of them. Now, you're going to have some differences in the tuning kits. That's not going to be universal, but they all offer the same type of rod and the same type of jet and the same type of step-up springs. That's kind of cool because you start collecting parts for all these things. They're all going to be pretty much the same. The tuning guide is covered in all of these, and they all read the exact same way. Now the rods and jets and springs and all that are going to be a little bit different for them, but really when it boils down to it, that tuning guide's pretty universal. There are a lot of support parts available for these carburetors. All of the linkages and the rods are pretty much the same for all of them, even though the manual electric choke stuff's a little bit different when you get down that road. But when you have so many universal support parts that are available for these carburetors, makes it kind of nice because parts become interchangeable in all of them. That's certainly a pro for all of it. When you get down to that original thing that these carburetors were really kind of talked about and famous for in the beginning, is there's no gasket or no gaskets below the fuel line in these carburetors. That's kind of a cool deal. In the old days, people always talked about, well, this other style of carburetor, they leak everywhere. The Edelbrock's designed that way so it doesn't have any gaskets below the fuel line. That's certainly a very cool pro when it comes to these carburetors. The cons are pretty universal as well, too, between all of them. These are all very sensitive to fuel pressure. If you're running 4.5 to 6 psi of pressure, you're generally pretty good. If you bump that pressure up 6.5, 7, 8, 9, 10 psi of pressure, they just don't like that. So running a pressure regulator with these carburetors is a really, really smart idea. So that's certainly universal between all of them. They're all sensitive to heat. They're aluminum body carburetor. They will transfer or accept heat very well. And so running a some sort of heat blocking spacer is certainly a very good positive piece to all that. So those are kind of the pros and cons that are general. We're not going to talk about these as we go through the three series of carburetors, but I want to talk about them all generally before we kind of covered it all. So the age-old, tried-and-true Performer Series carburetor. Now, there's two different versions of this, manual electric choke, but the pros and cons we're going to talk about are really the same for both of them. So these are really best for stock or really mild applications, and really this carburetor's been around forever. It's the one that Edelbrock purchased originally. The designs for the folks at Magneti Marelli, or that old Carter facility in North Carolina, has been making these carburetors since day one for Edelbrock, but a lot of those folks that worked there worked for Carter back in the day. So very, very cool carburetor, been around forever. But there are some pros and cons of this style of carburetor, so let's talk about that right now. The pros, it's still available. You can walk into just about any auto parts store chain in the United States, O'Reilly, Advance, AutoZone. They've probably got one on the shelf that you can purchase right there, walk out with it same day. There is a carb-approved 600, so if you're in one of those states that has carb restraints on what you can run, there is a street-legal 600 that's carb-approved. Very, very good for those folks that have to run it. Extremely dependable. These carburetors have been around forever, since the late 80s. They are extremely dependable. They're known for, setting the tune and just kind of walking away from it. And while that phrase of holding a tune really doesn't hold true, everything changes with dirt and elevation and fuel pressure. But these carburetors do a very good job of holding on to whatever that tune is in that situation. 500, 600, 750, and 800 CFM carburetors are available in the Performer series. That wide range of CFMs is kind of nice. This is the only Edelbrock carburetor that has a Marine U.S. Coast Guard compliant version available. That's a big deal because these Coast Guard legal carburetors are certainly very, very difficult. When you talk about running a standard carburetor on a marine application, it's a no-go. You will get in trouble if the Coast Guard catches you. The fines are ridiculous. Don't do it. This is the only series to have that Marine Coast Guard compliant version. Now, let's talk about the cons. This is a very old design carburetor. There's better technology available. That's certainly a con. Non-adjustable secondaries. We've talked about that, done a carburetor video or how to adjust and change those. I don't recommend doing it, but these are non-adjustable. So, again, better technology available out there. These are slightly more complicated to tune. Now, this really goes back to all of them. I guess we should have talked about that at the very beginning, but if you watch this channel, that's what these carburetor videos are designed to help you do on the tuning. We've done hundreds, it seems like, of videos, but it's probably close to only 100 videos on how to tune these carburetors, and they're slightly more complicated than a pretty mindless 4150 style carburetor. But the good thing about that is a little bit more complication, gives you a lot more adjustment points. It goes back to that stuff that holds a tune. Not really, it's just it gives you a lot of ways to tune it to make it more dependable and drivable for your application. These are really a limited amount of power that they'll support. Like I said, when I said they were made for stock or mild applications, it's kind of a con. But if you're a cruiser, a good fun driver with a little bit of performance, you cannot beat this Performer Series carburetor. It does extraordinarily well. It's really hard to beat in most of those applications, and you're hard-pressed finding a better street carburetor out there. Now, one last con on the Performer Series carburetor. It only has the fuel lead on the passenger side. There is no provision on the driver's side. We'll talk about that in just a second on the next generation of carburetor. But that is a bit of a con on this carburetor for sure. And that is your pros and cons for the Performer Series carburetor. This is the Edelbrock Thunder Series carburetor. Now, this is the first line of the AVS air valve secondary carburetors, and really it was kind of a bit of a game changer for Edelbrock because they had always run that Performer Series or had that Performer Series style carburetor, which was more of the AFB style, the way it flowed fuel on the secondaries. The pros on this one is fairly easy because this is the first one that had that adjustable AVS or air valve secondary, giving you the ability to tune when the secondaries tip in and start metering fuel. That's a pretty big deal when you talk about giving yourself another level of adjustment within this carburetor. That was the big pro in this carburetor when it came out, is having that AVS and being able to adjust those secondaries. 5, 650, and 800 were the sizes that these were available, so a little bit different. That EPS carburetor that was in that Performer Series in the 800, really kind of a late bloomer, really was introduced fairly late in the series of that carburetor, and still available today. But having a little bit larger carburetor was kind of a nicer deal when this Thunder Series came out. Now the cons, there's really only one. They piggyback off a little bit of the cons on the Performer Series, but really the con on this carburetor is it's no longer available. There are tons of used ones out there, but really we'd be remiss talking about the series of carburetors, even though this one is fairly recently discontinued. I think it was 2018, maybe 2019 that this was officially discontinued because there was no reason to keep it around when we talk about the next series of carburetor. But one last little pro on this one is this is the first generation of carburetor from the Performer up to this AVS style carburetor that has fuel in on the passenger side and the driver's side. So if you needed to, you can switch on where it goes or where it comes in, or on some of the fuel line kits that Edelbrock offers have the dual inlet. So your pump inlet from the fuel pump or past the regulator, fuel line will go into both sides of the carburetor. Kind of a nice deal, especially when you talk about that little bit of a con on some of these series of carburetors where you get a little bit of the starvation in it. We've covered that in a past video, but certainly having that other inlet is a nice little deal on the pro side. Really a very overall well designed carburetor, and now having that adjustability in the secondary is really a nice feature of this carburetor. So if you find yourself a used one and it's in the CFM size you want, go ahead and grab it. You won't be wrong with choosing this type of carburetor. And last in the series of carburetors, the new AVS2. I say new, it's been out for since 2016, maybe 2015. I can't remember when it came out, but this is the latest and greatest in technology. It's got all of the newest advancements and features. This is the replacement to the Thunder series, so they had to discontinue this AVS style carburetor when they didn't need to have those two series of carburetors. So the AVS2 is the newest and greatest. Annular booster primaries is the biggest pro to this carburetor. Talk about having a really nice throttle response. A little bit easier to tune out that little bit of bog that some people tend to get when they're tuning. Very, very easy. Very, very fun on the drivability. Some people have said, well, it kind of gives you almost a fuel injection feel in a carburetor type application. It's really hard to argue with that. I mean, once you get these tuned and dialed in, those annular boosters are a game changer for this carburetor. Kudos to Edelbrock for spending all that money that they did on the development of this to add those type of boosters and really do all of the configuration and calibration, endless amounts of dyno time trying to get this thing right. What a great deal to have those annular boosters. It's easily the biggest pro of this series of carburetors, and certainly one if you're going to look at what you want to use it for. Having an annular booster is certainly a great deal. So the newest, greatest technology. Same with the Thunder series, 500, 650, and 800 are the CFMs available in this carburetor. Don't know that I'd call it a pro, but it's certainly one thing that we need to make mention. Now, the cons on this one are fairly short as well, too. There is no marine version of this. Now, I have talked to the Edelbrock folks quite frequently over the years with this when this series carburetor came out. Will they ever make a marine version? And really the answer to that right now is probably no. Which is a real big downfall as far as I'm concerned. I think the boat guys would really enjoy that annular booster, especially given the RPM ranges that a lot of those cruisers on the water run at. They don't run at 65, 7,000 RPM for this type of application carburetor, and an annular booster on a marine application would be awesome. I think the biggest challenge there and the biggest con there is the money that the U.S. Coast Guard charges you to put this up for consideration and to pay the fee to get that U.S. Coast Guard certification. So that's a big con for it, but certainly for a street carburetor, the AVS2 is certainly hands down one of the funnest and easiest to tune. So not a lot of cons on this one. The pros, obviously you've got all the same ones that the Performer series had. You just enhance that now with that annular booster. So absolutely love this series carburetor. Those of you who have run it, I'm sure love it too, but that annular booster is the money maker on this one. And the last in the series of the Edelbrock carburetors is the really gnarly VRS 4150. Now, this one has only been out for about a year and a half. So I think people are still trying to understand it and get used to all the cool features on this thing, because quite honestly, the features on this carburetor seem absolutely endless. When you get into the 750 and above, they're all annular booster. They are certainly the newest technology available. Excellent for high horsepower race engines. They've got a throttle position sensor. Four corner idle adjustment is pretty big. The auxiliary idle circuit is certainly a pretty cool one. 4-circuit metering. Wow, those are features that you can't hardly even get in a custom carburetor. Really, really huge. Big float bowls in there. The way the floats are designed to keep the slosh down. So many little features in this. The pros, like I say, we could go on and talk about this forever and a day, it seems like. But really, really cool on the design of the thing. It's about a half-inch taller, which really allows them, or allowed Edelbrock to move the booster around in the Venturi to really get a really good signal out of it and deliver fuel the way it needed to be. And having all of that adjustment in the those four circuits is pretty remarkable. So again, I did a full video on this carburetor if you want to see all of the details on it, because quite honestly, I probably could have made an hour-long video on what this thing actually is and all the pros in it. Cons also are pretty limited here as well too, because it's a half-inch taller, and Edelbrock wanted it on a race carburetor to give it that adjustability and certainly deliver the power that it does. It's a con if you're a street guy. Sometimes underhood clearance is very difficult, and having half-inch taller carburetor for some folks is just kind of a no-go. No choke, and the reason why there will never be a choke on this carburetor is the way the air is needed to be metered through the vents. They have to have that. The vents are a key component to any of this type of carburetor, and how it meters the air down in there, and the pressure that gets into inside the carburetor is very, very critical. So it will never have a choke on it, so you'll never be able to buy this with an electric choke. You certainly will never buy this carburetor with a vacuum secondary style. So if you want all of those things, you're going to have to go back to the AFB or AVS style carburetor. This is really a race carburetor with some really, really cool street adjustments in it. So absolutely love this carburetor. We're going to talk more about it over the next year or so as we put it on more applications. My good friend Shane over at Slant Daily Garage put this actual 650 on his Slant 6 car. So if you want to check that video out, I'll link that as well, so you can go check it out. Very, very cool deal, but absolutely love this carburetor. Can't wait to tweak on it a little bit more. It's actually going next on another small block application before I will get it back to put it on mine to do some playing around and tuning. But yeah, the VRS here is the money shot. It is the newest, latest, greatest technology. All of the things a 4150 carburetor should have been done years ago, Edelbrock did to it. And the price is a really big pro on this. It is significantly cheaper compared to buying a custom billet. All of the function and capabilities that this carburetor has, ridiculously cheap when compared to a custom carburetor. So the VRS for a race application, hell of a carburetor. So here's the tough part. How do you choose which one of these carburetors is best for your application? Well, let's go ahead and knock out the easy one, and that's the VRS. That VRS is such a beautiful, amazing piece. I just can't get over how much development and features that are in that carburetor. But if you are a serious street user and you're making probably more than 650 horsepower, then considering the VRS is a good place to go. Now again, you've got to take all those cons and pros into consideration here. That is a very, very complex carburetor. You're probably not going to take advantage of most of those things with the 4 circuits and the air bleeds and the emulsions that are in that carburetor. But if you're looking for something that gives you a lot of ability to make a lot of power, a lot of great torque, having the extra capacity, all that, and you're in that area where you're making north of probably 650 horsepower, the VRS is where I would start. Now, again, it's got some challenges if you're a street driver, so got to take that into consideration. But if you're more of a race driver, cars feature or purpose built for that, then yes, that VRS is exactly what you're looking for. So really what it boils down to on a street car is how do you choose between the tried and true ABF or AFB style carburetor and the AVS. And really that's two things. I think it boils down to really price point and how much you're willing to or need to adjust the carburetor. Are you in a situation where, you've got a little bit more aggressive camshaft, not overly aggressive. You're, probably at 600 horsepower and under. But if you got a little bit hotter street car, but you still want the good cruisability, drivability, the best amount of economy that you can get out of it, that manual choke AVS2 carburetor is absolutely what you need. And again, you can choose on the CFM size to meet that application. We did a video on how to choose a correct CFM size, so that should help out there as well too. But really, if you're buying these new, which is what we really need to consider here, I think just making that choice between that tried and true AFB style where you don't need that adjustability in the secondary. You just need a good cruiser driver, something that's going to get around and be very dependable for you. That Performer Series carburetor is not going away anytime soon. They will continue to be on the shelf and easy to get a hold of. And same with the AVS2. Very, very easy to get a hold of now. I think most of those auto parts stores we talked about earlier probably stock the 650. I know quite a few of them do anyway, or at least can be able to get a hold of them within a day or two. So that's kind of what you need to kind of decide is how you're going to drive it, what's your purpose in it. Do you want a little bit more performance? Do you want a little bit more economy out of it? Again, we talked about that in a past video here really recently, that the manual choke, electric choke carburetors have different boosters in them, so it's going to be a little bit different in how they perform. The electric choke carburetors in this series of carburetor is always going to be your more fuel economical carburetor. The manual choke is more suited for performance applications, and the type of booster they put in there reflects that. We went into that in great detail on a video. I will also link that above as well too. So just be aware of those things when you're selecting a carburetor. So lots of little things to consider here, so let's kind of wrap it all up. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of something to think about between those series of carburetors. Really what it boils down to is you have to choose what's best for your application. We've talked about that a million times, it seems like, on this channel. There is no one right camshaft for a big block Mopar. That's the reason why there's 80 different grinds probably available or more. When you talk about custom grind stuff, there's not one carburetor type that's perfect for everything. There's not one fuel injection type that's perfect for everything. There's not one anything that's perfect. That's what's so cool about this hobby, is there's options available for the type of carburetor that you want to run. So if you're interested in running an Edelbrock carburetor, I've got tons of videos out there on how to tune these. It's not as complicated as you think they are. If you have any questions on what type of carburetor to run on your application, you want a recommendation, leave it down in the comments below. I'm always happy to do that. It's a big part of why I did this channel, is to be able to share some of those things I've learned over the years. So drop your questions down below. Always happy to answer them. And yeah, good luck with your choice of new Edelbrock carburetor. I know you're going to love what you choose. We'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.